Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You've reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that dares to dig just a little bit deeper. It is Thursday, December 23rd, 2021. We are kicking off tonight the 68th meeting of the No Name Cinema Society, starting as we always do with our current feature. And tonight it's the biggest film on the planet, Spider-Man No Way Home. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler, one of your co-hosts for tonight's discussion of Spider-Man No Way Home. Very excited to be with you. And I'm here in Astoria, New York, and Queens, where I'm going to be for the holidays. But I'll be back in LA by Monday for the Indie Spotlight. So just here for a little bit, and then I'll be back in New York a little bit in January, too. Back and forth the next couple months. So as we said, this is the 68th meeting of the No Name Cinema Society, our penultimate set of episodes for this, our 7th season. I do want to call out that one of the co-hosts for this show is supposed to be our friend, Zach Domingo, who's on several of the episodes. A couple of weeks ago, however, Zach was struck by a car while walking in Los Angeles. It was a hit-and-run accident. We were pleased to say Zach is out of the hospital, home and recovering, but is unable to get to the theater, so we had to have somebody fill in for him today. But I think I speak for all the society when I say we all wish Zach a speedy recovery and hope to see him back on the show soon. Filling in for Zach is basically me from another universe. Ladies and gentlemen, Devon Michaels is here.
You can call me Zach today if you want.
And coming to us live, ladies and gentlemen, from a universe full of mimes, the Enigma Max Fano is here.
Oh,
there he goes.
I have to drink.
That's right. We got to drink every time he does a mime. So guys, last year, in our top 10 films of 2017, Devon here named Wonder Woman as his number 9 film of that year. Exactly 51 weeks ago today, in this very same apartment, wearing this very same shirt, Devon and a much lighter me reviewed the sequel to that film that had made his top 10 list. On my top 10 of 2017, I had the first film in this trilogy, Spider-Man Homecoming, as my number 7 film of that year. And here we are again in December to discuss a sequel of a film that made our top 10 of 2017. So, Devon, next year we'll likely do the Phantom Thread sequel at this time.
Your mouth to God's ears.
So before we go any further, it's time to go over our schedule for this, our 68th series of episodes. Of course, starts tonight with our review of Spider-Man No Way Home. Continues on Monday, December 27th with our Indie Spotlight Other People, as we continue spotlighting indies from 5 years ago or 2016. And then next Thursday, December 30th, will be our classic movie discussion of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Then coming up on Monday, January 3rd, will be our 50-second sound off, where Jim and Matt will be with me. We're going to play the movie game. Matt has a second run of one of the films from our 1970 in review, and I am to count down the top 5 film performances by Saturday Night Live alums, based on our review of Other People. That's what's coming up in the next 10 days or so on the No Name Cinema Society. So cheers to our audience out there that's drinking. And if Max is going to do a lot of mime tonight, we're going to get wasted talking about Spider-Man.
Very few words this show. It's all mime.
Well, Devon's having a hard time hearing through his speakers, so that could help us.
Did you say something?
Got to drink more. All right, it's time to go right into the summary, unless you guys have any objections.
Let's do it.
Does it lie when you mouth the words? I don't think it does.
iPad's doing fine when he just mouths it.
Spider-Man No Way Home. Peter Parker is crumbling under the weight of his identity being revealed and has the idea to turn to Doctor Strange to possibly make people forget so he can do his work in anonymity. But the spell goes horribly wrong, creating a ripple in the multiverse, allowing the villains Spider-Man faced in the other universes to show up in this world. Those villains, unbeknownst to this Spider-Man, but knownst to us as moviegoers, like Doc Ock, Electro, and the Green Goblin. How was that summary with a veiled reference to Spaceballs in the middle of it? I don't know if you caught that.
Excellent.
That's what made it work.
Yes, it's knownst to us as audience goers. Anyway, so it's time for opening thoughts. One sentence or less. Max is probably the least comic fanboy we've ever had on the show, so I'd be curious to see what he says about this, because Zach, Jim, and I are big comic fanboy people. So as far as, I want to go first with you, because I'm fascinated to see what you think about Spider-Man No Way Home.
Oh my gosh. I really enjoyed it.
All right, I'm a little surprised, so and I feel good about it. Devon is somewhere between Max and me on the fanboy scale, so he'll go next. Devon, one sentence on Spider-Man No Way Home.
I thought it was a lot of fun, but overall I was mixed on how much of an impact it had on me.
I'm also surprised by that. I thought we'd be more simpatico. As far as I'm concerned, I consider the film a fanboy's dream, which includes me. I loved it. And so we'll dig into that. I do have some quibbles, so maybe Devin just put greater weight on the quibbles that I have, which I actually won't get to until the T word. It's going to be all love until then, for me anyway. And I want to start with the screenplay, because I think it's actually a terrific accomplishment. Fans of the show know I didn't enjoy how the script of the 2018 animated film handled the concept of the multiverse. And I also felt that the middle film in this trilogy, Far From Home, was far from good. In this film, however, I think they did a tremendous job of making it not only clearer, but also more palatable for my liking. Admittedly, some of the other Marvel films and TV shows have loosened the jar on the multiverse. Still, there's a ton of information that the screenwriters are able to convey without ever being didactic or losing the sense of fun. Don't underestimate how challenging that is. Speaking of challenges, they amazingly tied together not only the 3 films of this trilogy, but all 8 Spider-Man live-action films made in my lifetime, and they did it seamlessly. I would also say that this possibly might even be a more satisfying end to a phase than even Endgame. So much of the script for that film felt forced. Not so here, at least to me. Mastering the multiverse meant mastering the alchemy of the MCU. Just with all the information that they needed to convey, I just thought it was tremendous, tremendous work.
A lot of what you said, I totally agree with. I think they brought together so many different aspects of the franchise, if you will, even though that's a really painful word for me in film. It's like, which McDonald's restaurant are you going to? How varied is the meal from day to day? But I really enjoyed the connectivity of the whole thing. Probably the script was the area in which I thought it was least strong, only because the multiverse for me is just a way for the screenwriters to kind of create really interesting problems and then sort of sew them up in a bow so that I kind of leave not being that affected. But I did think that this was far and above better than the Avengers movie that you mentioned.
I would agree with you on the multiverse on a lot of the films leading up to this. But this one, I feel like, tied it all together for me. I see what you're saying. It did feel forced to me in so many of those other films. It seemed more defined to me in this one.
No, I totally agree with that. I think that being able to kind of wrap it up in the end, that was the weak point for me.
I hear you're saying that there was a business decision here to create the multiverse and make it, but I mean, I feel like they've really leaned into it. So it's like a choice that they made, and now it's like the thing. Just that in the first Avengers film, aliens was the thing. Right. That was the world that we had to accept for the first Avengers. It's now the thing, and this one leaned into it a little more successfully. Devin?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I definitely admire the work, the amount of work that was put into it. It did a really good job with a lot of the humor, with a lot of how it used the humor to take care of some of those connecting the dots between the previous incarnations. I felt like I really enjoyed the opening 15, 20 minutes. We all know Spider-Man's identity, and the way that they treated that section of the film was really fun to me and felt really natural, intimate with these characters. After that shifts and they find the way to put the toothpaste back in that tube, I felt things start to fall apart a little bit in terms of my suspension of disbelief. It seemed manufactured to me. It seemed contrived, to use one of your favorites, to have these villains who have pretty much already been vanquished and bring them back in this way.
I completely agree with the naturalism of the first act of the film. In terms of when that shift happens, I was skeptical, but I've seen Doctor Strange. Again, the jar was loosened on some of these things, and I was wondering if I would buy it, but to me, it was just enough. And it's interesting because generally speaking, I've got a higher threshold for contrivance maybe than most. I'm very sensitive to contrivance, and people are always like, oh, suck it up or whatever. It's funny that you would find something contrived that I eventually wound up buying, but it's so subjective, suspension of disbelief. I had just enough information to swallow it. It's a thin line, though.
Part of how that subjective difference emerges is because you have seen more of these than I have, and generally, I think, enjoy them more.
My follow-up question would be to you is, within this film, once they established rules, do you feel like they broke them?
No, but it didn't continue to had the ability to emotionally impact me.
It's almost what I said about Black Widow, so it's interesting.
Well, I have to applaud Devon because what he's bringing to this analysis is real thought and contemplation. We have these sort of one-line fixes because of magical elements in the film. The very real issue that Spider-Man has where his identity is revealed and the sort of human repercussions of that. How do you deal with that? And then he arrives at Mr. Magic's house. Well, we need to find a way out of Act 1, so we're going to have Doctor Strange simply say, well, we can do a magic thing.
One of the reasons I bought it is because, someone who's had the experience that this Peter Parker has had, having been to space, having blipped even, someone who's had these experiences dealing with this very human problem, with this sort of almost overreaching kind of solution. I can solve this by extraneous means that other people don't have access to. And what I'm trying to communicate here in this section is something that you agreed with, at least. For the most part, I thought they did a lot of work to tie the films, the universes all together, to explain the multiverse and tie everything together, and also just character work, which thankfully I'm able to segue to the next thing I was going to say. There are so many characters in this movie, and so many of them were established by other writers, in some cases 20 years ago. And yet each of the characters were very specific, vivid, and simultaneously true to the origins set forth by other writers. Each of us has written scripts before. Think about how hard that must be to stay true to established characters, but still make them work in this world that you created while balancing the sheer amount of them, and all while keeping it fun. I thought the dialogue was pretty great. As someone who has been known to dress like a cool youth pastor, I very much appreciate the sharp references and the way the writers use the different voices to mine comedy gold, at least to me.
I agree. That's where a lot of the work really sang, making sure to hit all of those character notes and make sure to really amp up the humor. I mean, there were a couple laughs on every page. I didn't feel like that many of the jokes were that funny. They were more just like, oh, yeah. There were 2 or 3 really good ones that made me laugh. And they weren't groaners. There were a lot more jokes. None of them were terrible. Very few were great, but there were just a whole lot of medium-level jokes.
Just like the Earth Girls Are Easy review, Devon turns comedy into a mathematical equation.
Yeah.
X% great jokes, Y% medium jokes.
Yeah.
But the word that stuck out that you said is groaners. And whenever I think of groaners, I think of Max. So Max, dialogue and character in Spider-Man No Way Home.
I was in a theater that was fairly full, and there were almost no moments where there was real laughter.
I had an opposite, like rolling the aisles kind of experience.
Really? Okay, well, I'm in a very serious part of town.
Unless you guys have more on screenplay, I'm going to segue to direction. It's similar in a sense. The first thing I want to talk about with direction is tonal balance. John Watts was pretty young when he made the first film, Homecoming, and still is, as a matter of fact. And that turned out to be a stroke of genius from Kevin Feige, in the sense that the best thing about this trilogy overall is how beautifully he captures the youthful angst of his teenage characters, their hopes, dreams, fears, loves, and their learning. All of that feels very true to me. And I think that's what spoke to Devon in the first 15, 20 minutes of the film. But that doesn't mean John Watts as a director shortchanges film or the trilogy in other ways. Not only does that land, but for me, the comedy, the drama, and the action all do as well from a directorial point of view. Frequently, a director is good at one thing or another, but I'm impressed again with Watts' ability in all of those disciplines and still able to deliver the occasional power image. As far as the action itself is concerned, there were 3 sequences in the film that I thought were particularly noteworthy. The highway to the airport, the battle in Doctor Strange's Strange World, and the finale. All of them were well choreographed to me, impactful, fun, smart, while keeping us aware of off-screen space and geography to add to our involvement and excitement.
I thought he did a solid job. That youthfulness that you're talking about, the kind of warmth that comes from that, was less present here. I agree with you that the action sequences felt fun and comprehensible, unlike some of these movies can get just so all over the place you have no idea what's going on.
Clearly, Mr. Watts knows what he's doing. He's very good at making show. Beautifully choreographed, the action on the bridge. But I didn't feel like he created visuals that were out of the box, except for the area where the screenplay allowed him to really explore the human struggle that the character was facing when his reality was out of the bag.
And he did that section well, so he can do that, but then the screenplay went in a different direction and he went with it. If anything, as he grows, there could be some more nuance in some of these scenes. There's a couple moments here and there where I saw potential. And while none of the performances in any of the films have been amazing to my mind, they're extraordinarily consistent to John Watts' credit.
I agree.
I've never had any issues with the actors in this franchise, though they were tested less in the previous films. They're fine again here, but I will say I felt the chemistry between Tom Holland and Zendaya was most impactful in this film as compared to others, which only stands to reason as they develop together as actors. I do want to call out some of the cameos, for lack of a better word, from some of the other franchises. They're in the trailer, so they're not really spoilers. And we talked about Willem Dafoe a lot on this particular show. He's appeared on films in 8 different top 10 lists over the course of the show. I think it was Max, actually, who said he takes big swings sometimes, and that's why he's so interesting as an actor, because sometimes he'll hit and it'll be amazing, but sometimes he'll miss because he's taking the big swing. And that's how I felt about his first turn as the Green Goblin back in 2002. I like that film a lot, as I've said, but I always felt he overdid it a bit. He seemed to have ideas, but forced some of them. And that's always been one of my only real problems with that first Sam Raimi film. Here, however, I thought he nailed it. As if he knew what he missed 19 years ago and relished the opportunity to come back and show us what he had learned. Osborn's manic multiple personality disorder was more vivid here, more grounded, I believe, and as a result, much more frightening. Less about making faces, more real character work, more true pain and fear and rage in Willem Dafoe in this film.
That was one of the highlights of the film.
Devon, anything on Willem Dafoe?
I couldn't agree more. I particularly thought Willem Dafoe outdid himself. I felt exactly the same way. I felt like he did better than he did in the first appearance of his character. Like he had more time to figure it out and find that little fine line.
Yeah. Max, do you have more on the performances?
I thought a lot of the performances were great. Nobody stood out that seemed unbelievable. There was a star turn in the film. I don't know if you guys remember the British reporter, Paris Benjamin, blew me out of the water. Her performance was impeccable.
Okay.
Friend of yours.
She's a friend of mine. But it was exciting to see her.
Yeah. In general, I thought Tom Holland's performance was really top-notch. He had a lot to carry. He aced it. In terms of Zendaya and in terms of their connection, there were a couple of moments that bumped for me in the beginning. Like she was aware of her cute, mannered banter. But there were just a couple moments in those early scenes I felt taken out of it by a couple of her deliveries. Other than that, I thought they were solid. I thought she was solid in the whole last 3 quarters.
I thought they were great. Tom Holland seems more experienced. I thought that there was some raw element to her performance. It wasn't as refined as his, and therefore possibly in moments a little bit more free and alive.
I thought Alfred Molina was, of course, fantastic. He did so much with the screen time he had. He was really excellent.
Alfred Molina, I think, is one of the best actors we've got today.
I liked him too. I thought he was great. I just called out Willem Dafoe because Alfred Molina was great in Spider-Man 2. He had figured out that character a lot early on. I felt the need to call out Willem Dafoe because of the difference between his original incarnation.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about one performance that I can't reveal the actor's name. It would be a spoiler. One of the surprise actors in the film has a lot of good moments, but has an Oscar-worthy moment. Just a moment. Toward the very end, this actor, whom I've always felt has been a little underrated, gives Tom Holland a look. No words, just a look. And it's so impactful, so cinematic, communicates so much. A moment worthy of studying for young film actors. That's how good it is. And I can't reveal the actor or its context in the film. I'm trying to dance around as much. I hope you guys are clear what I'm talking about. But there's a moment in this film that is just, from this actor, that is powerhouse. Great acting in a comic book movie film.
I know exactly the moment you're talking about and the actor you're talking about. I have to credit John Watts a lot with that moment because he really stays on him so deliberately, and that's why it's so strong.
I almost had the actor's interpretation of it in the sense that I assumed this actor was giving him something, and that made John Watts think, oh, I can't cut away from this. This is too good. The director reacting to what the actor was giving him and then making a choice based on the performance that was given.
I agree that that's possible.
That's another thing to do it, though.
No, he pulls it off.
I do have one performance. You guys all like them. I had one performance that I didn't enjoy. Just one. I felt like Benedict Cumberbatch was kind of phoning it in as Doctor Strange this time around. His character has a bit of a journey, And I needed more from him, even in the screen time that he was given. I feel like his transitions weren't earned. Maybe he was distracted by working on Power of the Dog, but he didn't seem fully there. Max has suggested he wanted more from the screenplay as far as he's concerned, but I saw an arc there for his character that he just sort of like does without the transition element.
I thought he was fine because I thought there was so little for him to do. It was literally his job to give these one-line statements that would just flip the action. I don't know how you could create the believability of character arc through these brief interactions that he had.
I'll tell you, Max, the 3 best actors in Los Angeles can do it.
Yes, yes.
As one of those 3.
Oh.
No, I agree with JB on this. He's definitely a strong actor, of course. This wasn't one of his better performances. I think he could have done more, even with the limited space that he had to do it in. You know, Alfred Molina didn't have any more than he had. Benedict Cumberbatch did not quite fill those as much as he normally has in the past.
Even in this same character, like in the original, when playing Doctor Strange in either the film or the Avengers films, he was much more successful. It's very apples to applesy kind of comparison, I think.
Yeah.
Max, it's your favorite segment. What time is it?
What time is it? It is time to go. It is the tea time. Tea time.
This is the segment where we talk about themes of a film, and sometimes for current features we don't have as much to say, but this one I do. I have quite a bit to say. One of the things that is very special about the film to me is its not so subtle exploration of criminality, especially as it relates to its origins and, by extension, rehabilitation. It's a unique idea to take on in a superhero franchise, a genre that depends so heavily on the concept of heroes and villains. I thought it was particularly bold to attempt to demystify that to some degree, almost blurring those lines. The next few sentences might come close to being spoilers, so viewers be warned. The film flirts with the dark idea that while rehabilitation is possible, it's not guaranteed in all cases, and in some cases isn't 100% effective. Now, the film walked that back a little bit, and that's my main disappointment with the film. Also disappointed the suggestion that there's a simple antidote somewhere to evil and criminality, like a switch you can turn on and off. While it makes sense in context, given the history of these particular villains, I worry that it gives the wrong idea. The film also at one point suggested the mental health care required in real rehabilitation, but it didn't dig deeper on that. Still, I think at the very least, the film will be a conversation starter for younger audiences. Don't underestimate how important that is. The most recent CMS we had here in New York was It's a Wonderful Life, and we were discussing one of the themes of the film being human decency. But many audience members rejected that idea full out, suggesting that 55% of the population, that was the number thrown out, 55% of the population was preternaturally evil, bad people by nature. I personally don't believe that, and I think that the film doesn't either. I think a slightly different conclusion might have been a more realistic interpretation of a nuanced concept, but I do appreciate them suggesting that there is hope even for some of the scariest villains. Something along the line made them bad, and perhaps that can be addressed before more dire alternatives. There are those that suggest that their deeds should deny them the privilege of our compassion and help. Though it may seem counterintuitive, perhaps that compassion can prevent future misdeeds, ending or at least slowing the cycle of evil or the cycle of violence. That's a theme I have on Spider-Man No Way Home in terms of criminality and my interpretation of it. Devon, I'm afraid you have a lot to say on this and not a lot of time.
Well, I'll try to keep it brief. Just I appreciated that being introduced in this film. I generally very much sympathize with that take on criminality and on compassion. It's shifted a bit in the last 5 years. I still have the same general opinion about understanding the systemic problems that cause misdeeds as opposed to just labeling and saying that person's just bad. I still maintain all of those perspectives, and I admire the way the film does bring those to the fore. But the way this story unfolds, the nature of the type of villains that we're dealing with in this film made me feel like it watered down that question.
Which I sort of hinted at
in
my diatribe there.
And I agree. It felt like that got a little muddy in terms of whatever questions it was asking you to answer as a viewer.
The main thing is that I appreciate that you also sort of said is it sort of puts it in doubt for younger audiences that it's not as binary as good and evil as a lot of other films of the genre might make it seem.
Right.
I think what you're both saying is very interesting. Devon, again, so kind of interesting and introspective and detailed in his thinking.
Do you notice how Max never compliments me on the show anymore? Like,
so anyway, I really appreciate what Devon was saying. I definitely appreciate the complication of this question of good and evil, and mental health is not a black and white thing. I think that's important as a theme in a movie like this. Absolutely. I definitely think it's broad strokes. They didn't dig all that deep, which is unfortunate because that again is a real topic and a place for a lot of originality and deep exploration.
And it's my primary issue with the film. It's the only real drawback for me and why it holds it back from Homecoming, because it's so fun otherwise. And it's disappointing because I thought they were going there. All like these seeds were planted for that exploration.
Good stuff.
I mean, this one it's almost obvious. The most famous line from the original Spider-Man trilogy, the one starring Tobey Maguire, was, "With great power comes great responsibility." Though that as a theme operated on the fringes of the previous film in this trilogy, the synthesis of all the franchises is the perfect vehicle to bring that idea once again to the forefront. The beauty of it to me is how more difficult that idea it must be for this, the youngest version of a Spider-Man, to grapple with the sacrifices you have to make for the greater good when you just want to be a kid and make out with your girlfriend. What I hope resonates is that it's not just true of superheroes. We all have or will have some power over something or someone at some point in our lives, whether it be in the workplace or in a relationship or what have you. So much of what you read about today is abuse of power, particularly in the workplace. Wherever you have this so-called power, are you considering how your actions affect other people? Which is not to say you always have to placate them when you're in those positions of power. As Lincoln once paraphrased, you can't please all the people all the time, but you should at least consider them, and more often than not, consider them above your own wants and needs if you are in a position of power. That's the burden of the power that you work so hard to get. It might also be the reward as well. Again, it's an element in all 8 films to some degree, but it's most prevalent in this film, at least related to this trilogy.
I guess I was really surprised by this, actually, because this is a statement that is deep in the sort of the history of literature and culture, and I'm sort of surprised that nobody knew that it existed before Spider-Man. I
knew.
Well, no, I'm not saying you didn't necessarily, but in the context of the film, it felt like everybody was like, oh, what an interesting idea. This is a very powerful statement that exists in a different way in the Bible and Voltaire. This is not a new thing. I agree
with that, but sometimes a reminder is helpful. Like even if you're Spider-Man, you get wrapped up in things, and sometimes it's like that reminder, like just any good thing. Like when Devon reminds me to calm down, or there's more fish in the sea. Like I know there's more fish in the sea, but when Devon says it, it's a nice reminder. The concept in this film was May sort of reiterating it so that in that moment it sank in, because in that moment there was a lot of rage and anger and fear. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot going on in that moment, and that a reminder might have been useful. That was my...
Certainly, and it totally relates to J.K. Simmons' character, because he's completely abusing his power as a news person. It's very prevalent right now, obviously.
It's good for the film to remind us, because it's as obvious as it might seem, the people in power were not adhering to that concept.
I really just agree with what's been said. I think Max just stated it really well about how this ties some of these issues together. And I agree with you. I thought it was clever how they wove that quote into this one and brought it back from a different character. And yes, it's a pretty straightforward theme. It's still an important one that does bear repeating.
I'm going to skip closing thoughts in the interest of time, guys, and I'm just going to go to telling about what our next current feature is going to be. Even though it's going to be January soon, we want to continue. We only want to review 2021 eligible films as part of our 7th season. We don't want to start worrying about 2022 yet. And so the next film we're going to do is Cyrano. It's open in theaters here and also in Los Angeles to qualify for Oscar consideration, but it doesn't open nationwide until January 21st. We will release our review on Thursday, January 27th. That will kick off our 69th series of episodes and our final set for our 7th season. Our next show, however, will be this upcoming Monday night, the December 27th, our first show after Christmas. It'll be the Indie Spotlight, another movie from our top 10 films of 2016, Other People, starring Jesse Plemons and Molly Shannon. And that'll be coming up this Monday night after Christmas. So, guys, I'm not going to see you before Christmas. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy holidays. Devon and Max, thanks for talking about Spider-Man with me. I love you both very much. Happy holidays to you guys. And so say goodbye to the audience.
Bye. Love you too. And enjoy. enjoy this film. Never mind what I said. Just go enjoy it, and also enjoy the holidays.
So,
thank you, JB. Thank you, Devon. Love you both, and happy holidays.
And Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to those of you out there. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.